Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at nun preiset, alle, Gottes Barmherzigkeit, which translates to now everyone praise God's mercy. Fairly straightforward chorale, really not too much to write home about in this one. It's going to be a quick video today, so let's hop right into the analysis. So we have 1 sharp in the key signature, we start on G major, we end on G major. I reckon the overall tonality of this chorale is G major. However, our first cadence is an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of C major, and it kind of has that subdominant cadence feel that I've been talking about in the last couple of videos because they've been popping up coincidentally. Passing 7th in the bass, E, B, E, and G is E minor. That's our 6th chord. And then we have F sharp, D, F sharp, and A. D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our 5 chord D major. That takes us to 1, which is G major, G, D, G, and B. However, that's also 5 in the key of C major. And we also know that because we have F natural here rather than F sharp. And then that takes us to C major, C, C, E, and G. Tonic triad, root position. The next phrase is a little bit longer, and it remains in the key of C major. It also ends in a perfect authentic cadence. We start with F major, F, C, F, and A, which is our 4 chord. A is a chord tone, E is a delayed passing 7th, before we get D, D, F, and B. It's B diminished over D, which is 7-6. Very common progression in Bach's writing. And then we get C major, C, E, G, and C. Tonic triad, root position. E is the 3rd of the chord, so the chord is turning into first inversion on the end of the beat. And then we get G major, G, D, G, and B, which is our 5 chord. This F right here is the chordal 7th, but we'll mark it as a non-chord tone, sort of enclosing the E. On the final cadential chord, we have C, E, G, and C, which is our tonic triad in root position, and also the end of the phrase. Okay, next phrase, we see sort of two phrases that are sort of kindred spirits to one another in terms of their construction. We get a phrase that starts in a key, modulates to another key, and then the following phrase stays in that key. So here we're going to be moving from the key of C major to the key of D major, which is a distant modulation. That's, I guess, a little bit interesting. We have G, D, G, and B, which is our 5 chord in the key of C. And then we have G major again, G, D, G, and B. So our 5 chord, we don't need to reanalyze. We have a passing 7th here, but because this is F sharp, and we also have C sharp on the next beat, we know that a modulation or some type of tonicization is in order here. As far as analyzing it is concerned, we're moving to the key of D major, and this is now our 4 chord. We then have E, E, G, and C sharp, which is C sharp diminished over E. That's 7-6, another 4-7 progression. And that takes us to D major, which is our tonic, D, A, F sharp, and D. And that continues over the span of the whole measure. And this is either an imperfect authentic cadence because it goes from D to A, or maybe it's a perfect authentic cadence because the leading tone goes up to D and this A is sort of supplementary rather than it being really the real trajectory of the melody. So maybe this is a perfect authentic cadence, but I'll err on the side of caution and call it an imperfect authentic cadence. And in the next phrase we get a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major again. So we start off with G major, G, D, G, and B. It's our 4 chord. We then have A, G, and C sharp, which is 5-7, A7. And then we have B, D, F sharp, and D, which is either a 6 chord or some type of 4-6 chord. I'm just going to say 6. It doesn't really matter whether it is 6 or 4-6. It really just depends on whether you hear this G as the root of the chord or this F sharp as the 5th of the chord. It doesn't really matter too much. But regardless, that's going to take us to 1 in first inversion. Kind of an interesting progression here. We have F sharp, D, A, and D. With actually a C sharp here, so you know what's actually happening. This isn't one I almost tricked myself. This is 5/6 of 4. If this were a C sharp, I think this would be a 1 chord. But with the C natural happening here, it feels like the 4 chord on the next beat is being tonicized. G, B, G, and D. So yeah, D is not just operating as a tonic here, but it's operating as the dominant of 4. We have a little neighboring 7th here in the alto before we get A, G, and C sharp, which is 5/7, A7. E is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. And then we cadence on D major, which is our tonic. D, A, F sharp, and D. For the last phrase of the first section, we see another distant modulation, pretty much right to the key of A minor, which is kind of interesting, and the phrase ends with a perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor. We start off with D major, D, D, A, and A. Sorry, not D minor, D major, which is our tonic triad, and I think also because this F sharp is the beginning of this melodic minor fragment in A minor terms, I think this is also where we modulate to the key of A minor and is now our 4 chord in root position. The chord pretty much stays the same except the bass changes to C natural here, which would be taking the chord and putting it in third inversion, so 4/4/2. We would expect this to resolve to 7/6, which it does. B, D, G sharp, and B. G sharp diminished over B. And that takes us to A minor. A, E, A, and C. B, D, A, and D. I think this A is a 7/6 suspension over the bass, and G sharp would be another 7/6 chord here. And when we see 1 go to 7/6, we typically expect a 1/6 chord on the other side, which is the case here. We have C, C, A, and E. This is a very common pattern in Bach. Chord, a chord that's a diatonic step below in first inversion, and a chord. That is the same root as the first chord in the progression, but in first inversion, or the retrograde, so 1/6, 7/6, 1 is equally as common. Passing tones in the inner voices here, where we have a C, B, G, and E. Maybe there is a little passing C major 7 chord there. Maybe I will mark that like a 3/7 chord. It's not really super impactful in the harmony, namely because, C major 7 and A minor are relatively similar chords. But we do go to C, A, F sharp, and D, which is D7 over C, which is 4/4/2 again. We would expect that to go to 7/6, which it does. B, B, G sharp, and D. Typically 4/2 chords resolve down by step in the bass, and the roots are a fifth apart downwards, so 4 goes to 7, and it should be going to 7 in first inversion, just because that's how the bass works out. And that takes us to A minor. A, C, A, and C. 2 roots, 2 thirds, but the 5th gets introduced in the tenor on the end of the beat. And then we get ready for our cadence. We have D, F, A, and B. We know that Bach loves 2/6/5 chords, especially in cadential contexts. That's B minor 7 flat 5 over D. That takes us to E major, which is our 5 chord. E, E, G sharp, and B with a passing 7th in the tenor. And then the section comes to an end with A minor. A, C, E, and A. Tonic triad, root position. Then we get this interesting repeat at the end here. It's not very common for us to have repeats outside of the beginning of the chorale, but it's pretty cool. We have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of G major right here at the end, and I'm going to call this a direct modulation. Not only is this the beginning of a new section, but something about C major coming from A minor when it's the sort of like the object of a modulation makes it feel like it's its own separate idea. So yeah, C major could be a common chord between the two keys, but it doesn't really feel like it's functioning as a common chord. It's always a toss-up when we're going from phrase to phrase like that, but you could analyze it as a common chord if you wanted to. A minor could even be a common chord if you wanted it to be, but I just don't hear it that way. These feel like separate ideas to me, but it really is semantics. So long as you understand that there's a modulation happening in the next phrase or going into the next phrase, I think that that's the big takeaway here. So like I said, we start off with C major, which is our 4 chord, C, G, E, and E, with a passing tone in the alto. We then have C, C, G, and E, no need to reanalyze. Then we have 3 voices moving off of the harmonic rhythm that's typically indicative of a subdivided chord progression, B, D, G, and D, which is our tonic triad in first inversion, G major. That takes us to A minor, A, E, A, and C, which is our 2 chord with a passing 7th on the bass. We then have F sharp, D, A, and D, which is 5/6, D major over F sharp, passing tone in the bass, passing tone in the alto, and then we have D, D, F sharp, and D, which is just taking our 5 chord and putting it in a root position with a little delayed passing 7th in the melody here too, and that takes us to our tonic G, D, G, and B, G major, passing 7th in the bass. We then have E, E, G, and C, C major over E, that's 4/6, F sharp, D, A, and C, it's D7 over F sharp, that's 5/6/5, and then we have G major, G, D, G, and B, root position tonic triad, C, E, G, and A, that's a 2/6/5 chord. We know that Bach loves 2/6/5 chords, especially in cadential context, that's A minor 7 over C. Then we have D major, D, D, F sharp, and A, which is our 5 chord, passing 7th in the tenor, and then we get G major to close out the chorale. G, B, D, and G. Root position, as we would expect at the end of a chorale, at least the majority of the time. But that's today's analysis. Very straightforward chorale today. It's in 3/4 time, so we're analyzing less material, like 25% less material, just objectively speaking in a chorale of this length. But really there's not too much to write home about. We have this little subdominant cadence here, kind of, sorta. And when I say subdominant cadence, if you've watched my previous videos, chances are you know what I'm talking about, but if you haven't, this idea of starting in a key and then either quickly modulating to the key of the subdominant, or just the phrase feeling like it cadences on the 4 rather than a modulation occurring, is this sort of subdominant cadence that I've been talking about in a handful of my videos in the past. It popped up a lot earlier in the channel's history because they happen in more frequency in the earlier BWV numbers, so that was more of a coincidence, but they've been making a resurgence recently, and it's pretty exciting because there was a very long period of time where I was analyzing and I had not come across another one of these subdominant cadences, but they've been coming back, like I've said. And also distant modulations, so C major to D major, and then D major to A minor. That's 2 notches away on the circle of fifths. Which is typically uncommon for Bach, but you know, it's not unprecedented. It's much more common for keys to be related by a step, the keys are typically a fifth apart from one another in a roundabout way, so they're adjacent to one another on the circle of fifths is what I'm trying to say. But other than those 2 things, fairly straightforward chorale. The harmony operates the way we would expect, and I'm going to cap the video off on that thought. If you're interested in following me along on the journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. You could also hit the notification icon and like the video if you enjoyed the content. Thank you so much for watching the video and supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.